So let's get started then. So welcome to our NHS Pensions Boosting Your Pension webinar. And what we're going to do, as I've mentioned, is to try and just give you some ideas of ways in which you can improve your pension benefits to help your retirement planning. Okay, so nothing in this webinar is financial advice, but what it is guidance to give you information to help you with your decision making. So there's a few things that we're going to try and cover today. We are going to do a little bit of an introduction, and it's going to be a very quick introduction into the NHS Pension Scheme. We run separate webinars that go into the detail about how the scheme works and pre-retirement planning and things. So you can find those on our website, which is pengage.co.uk/webinars, and they're all free to attend, and you can attend as many as you like. Similarly, pre-recorded webinars are also found on our YouTube channel. So if you feel like you need to know more about the scheme and how it works, that's not this webinar, but there will be others that will cover that off for you. We are then going to talk about different saving options that you might have. So what we call private savings. So savings outside of the NHS pension scheme, really. And then we're going to move on and focus on the different areas that you can save more into your NHS pension, but within the NHS pension. So they are mainly additional pension, something called ERRBO, AVCs or money purchase AVCs. We'll touch a little bit on added years if there's anybody who's doing that already, and then we need to talk a little bit about some of the tax limits at the end called the annual allowance. Also, when I do additional pension, I'm going to switch my screen out and I'm going to demonstrate one of the calculators on the NHS Pensions website because it seems to cause everybody an awful lot of bother. So I thought we could do a quick demo that might help as well. Okay. So very briefly then, let's launch straight in. I should say as well, if you've got questions, I will pause at various points to pick up the questions in the chat box. But knowing now how we're structuring the session, can I ask that you keep the questions to the section that we're doing? So if I'm talking about additional pension and you've got a question about ERRBO, can you wait until we're doing the ERRBO session? It's just because it means then I can keep the flow of the session moving better for you so that you get maximum information in a kind of quite a smooth way, if that's all right. If I miss anything, there will also be time at the end to cover any questions that we haven't gone over. Okay. Hello, Emma. Actually, let's start with Emma's question. It's a really good point. Emma is making an assumption that NHS Scotland pension is the same as NHS England. So predominantly, yes. So NHS England and Wales is NHS Business Services Authority. NHS Scotland is SPPA and NHS Northern Ireland is HSC. Everything that I'm going to tell you about the options that you have for paying additional contributions is the same right across all of those nations. So the bulk of this session is absolutely chipper and will work for all of you. The bit that will be a bit different, Emma, is when I'm going to demo the additional pension calculator, I'm going to demonstrate the one that is for England and Wales. You can use it in Scotland, but the factors which is the rate that they do the calculation might be slightly different, so it's not going to give you exactly the same results, but SPPA do also have their own stuff on their website as well. Okay, but what you can do and how it works is the same across all of the nations. All right. I just want to start though by just making sure that we understand the two different types of pension scheme you can have, and that's going to be really important for later on, because later on we're going to look at your options, and those options are different types of pension scheme. So we need to understand what they are to then understand what the option is. So when we're looking at pensions in the UK, we kind of put them into two main categories, and they are what we call defined benefit and defined contribution. And they're often abbreviated, as you can see on the slide here, to DB and DC. So, and they work really differently, and that's what we really need to understand. So with a defined benefit scheme, or DB, effectively, you receive from that pension an annual income for life for when you stop work and take that pension, very much like a salary. So if I take my pension at, say, 60, and that is £10,000, it's £10,000 every year that I'm alive as a regular income, like a salary. Okay. So the way that we calculate your pension for defined benefit schemes is through a formula. And that formula usually circulates around your service, so your length of time in the scheme and your pay. And you will pay a contribution to receive this annual income for life. And it's a promise. So it's a guaranteed income and it's also inflation linked. And within those schemes as well, you can choose to have some lump sum tax-free in exchange for some pension. So that's a defined benefit scheme. So your NHS pension is a defined benefit scheme. It comes into this category here because what it does is it provides you with that income for life. Okay. So if my pension is £10,000 a year and I live for 20 years, that means I'm going to have had £200,000 worth of pension from my NHS pension in a very simple way. Would actually be more because of inflation, but just kind of quite simplistically. Defined contribution schemes, or DC schemes, are very different. They are essentially an investment product. So that means that the contributions that you pay into a defined contribution scheme are invested in a pot or a fund for you as an individual. And the value of that fund can go up or down depending on investment performance. So over time, we typically expect that investments will go up. You know, we see it all the time, don't we? With the price of things going up and inflation and things like that, it kind of creeps up. But along the way, it might do a little bit of zigzagging, but from there to there, we would expect it to be higher. But there isn't a guarantee, and it does very much depend on stock market fluctuations. Now, because those contributions are invested for you as an individual, you take that risk. There's no promise to pay you a set level of benefits. There's no promise for an annual income for when you stop work. Now, the really nice thing about these defined contribution schemes is there is a greater degree of flexibility as to when and how you can access them, but they are very, very different. Most pensions in the private sector now come under the category of defined contribution. We don't find many defined benefit schemes in the private sector anymore because essentially they just got too expensive. So we all tend to have defined contribution schemes. So you need to kind of hang on to that bit of information because it will become quite important when we start looking at the separate options. So all three sections of the NHS pension scheme. So we've got 95, 2008 and 2015. All three sections are defined benefit schemes, and that is because they all have a formula that calculates how your pension works. So I'm not going to go through the slides, but just to include it within the slide deck for completeness, you'll see with your copy that we've actually broken down the formula for how those pensions are calculated, and that is what you should see on your annual statements as well. Okay. Now, as we've said, you pay a contribution to be in the pension scheme. These are the new contribution rates from April this year, and the contribution that you pay is based on your earnings. So we look at whatever your pensionable pay is, and that would be the percentage that you should be paying. It's always a good idea to check this because sometimes it goes wrong. So on your payslip each month, it will show you the percentage and the amount of pension contribution that has been taken off. I would always advise you to check that. I know that you will all especially check your payslips every single month, won't you? So do check. So if, for example, my salary is £30,000 a year, then I would be in this bracket here, and my contribution should be 8.3%. So do always make sure that you check your contributions. Your employer also pays for you to be a member of the NHS pension scheme as well, and their contribution is quite a lot more. Their contribution now is nearly 24% of your pay. So for each of you, that is what your employer also pays into the pension. So the combined contributions, yours and theirs, is what the scheme estimates is needed in order to provide you with that regular income that we talked about based on those formulas. Okay, so it's an extremely valuable benefit because of the rate that the employer pays to give you that promise of income. Why am I talking about this? Because when you pay into a pension scheme in the UK, you will receive tax relief on those contributions. So, for example, if your contribution was £100 a month and you were a 20% taxpayer, then actually the cost to you is £80 a month because you're getting that tax relief on those contributions. Now, no other form of saving in the UK offers that, and that's why pensions are quite an attractive way of saving or increasing your income at retirement, because you're instantly getting that tax relief. So it's a really good way to save. So I've got a couple of examples here for you to see. So we've got a basic rate taxpayer. So a basic rate taxpayer is somebody who earns less than £50,270 currently in England and pays 20%. And a higher rate taxpayer is somebody who pays over 50,270 and therefore will pay 40% tax on some of their income. So you can see from the examples here, £30,000, the monthly contribution is 220, but the tax relief is 44. So actually it's costing them £170 rather than 220. And similarly for a higher rate taxpayer, if it's £625, they're actually costing them 375 because they're getting £250 worth of tax relief. So it's quite significant. It's quite a big amount. Now, this applies to any additional pension savings that you participate in. So where you're choosing to save more into a pension, you will get tax relief on those contributions. Okay. Okay, hi Tina. Sorry, I've only just seen your question. Sorry. So Tina's asked me to go slow, so I'll pause in case I need to go back through it again. So a colleague has told Tina that she's basic rate taxpayer, but her pay is 52,809. Okay. So is your total pay 52,809? Because remember, we are taking your pension contributions off your pay before we calculate your tax. So if 52,809 is before your pension contributions are taken off, that very slightly puts you into the 40% bracket for a little bit of your pay. But when we work out what your pension contributions are for the year and we take them off, does that then put you below 5270? In which case they are correct and you would be a basic rate taxpayer. So it just depends on the threshold. Right, Tina, so I think you'd be right then, you probably are okay. So Tina said in the chat there she also pays additional pension, so she's probably paying enough that's pulling her below that 40% bracket. Just a reminder as well that income tax works in thresholds. So for our person here who, for example, has a salary of £60,000 a year, that is more than 5270. So that does put them into the 40% tax bracket. But they would only pay 40% tax on the bit that was over the 5270. The bit below is still basic rate or no tax. So remember, it works in thresholds. It's not when you drift into the 40% bracket, you suddenly pay 40% on everything. That's not how it works, okay? Is overtime included or salary only? Katrina, it depends on what you mean. So do you mean for pension purposes or do you mean for tax purposes? Because you will pay tax or you will be assessed for income tax on all of your income, including any overtime, but minus any pension contributions, as we mentioned. From a pension point of view, your overtime might be pensionable if you work part-time. Okay, so you cannot pay pension contributions on anything more than full-time equivalent pay. So if you're full-time and you do overtime, it's not pensionable. But if you're part-time and you do overtime, then the overtime is pensionable up to full-time rates. The exception is where you work unsocial hours, because unsocial hours has an unsocial hours premium, and that is pensionable. So the best thing to do is have a Google, but also have a look at your pay slips so that you can work out what is pensionable and what is not. Okay. So let's now get into our different options for increasing our savings. Now, what I'll say at this point is the general rule of thumb is if you can pay more, then do, because one, it's increasing your income for when you stop work. But the second thing is the tax relief that we talked about before. It's quite an efficient way to save. However, what I often hear is people saying to me, I need to pay more because I need more. Okay, that's great. Okay. How much Is your pension going to be currently? Well, I don't know. Okay. And how much do you need? Well, I don't know. Okay. So how much more do you need? Well, I don't know. Right. So what are we doing here? Do you see what I mean? So we do need to go back to basics, and we do need to look at, well, how much do I need, and therefore what do I want to do? Because the different options will allow you to do different things. So the basic logic of I want to pay more and save more is very sound in almost all circumstances. But what you do and the options available, you need to understand more. You need to understand, what do I want to achieve? How much is my pension might that look like? How much do I need, do I think? And therefore, what are my options about what I want to do and what one suits me best? There is no point in running into any of these options having not done your legwork at the beginning. And you'll hear me say it on many webinars, walk, do not run into these things. So that's not to say procrastinate and drag it out for 25 years before you do anything, but it does mean that you have to do the due diligence and you have to check and understand to make sure you're making the right decision for you. And that's really important. Okay. So private savings, we've got a little bit in here to talk to you about non-pension options. So pensions, as we've said, are a super tax efficient way of saving, but they're not the only way of saving. There are some other things you can do. And again, I'm not talking about every single option here. I'm just giving you a few things to think about. So you can look at an ISA. So an ISA stands for Individual Savings Account. I've just looked at the captions and it says ISIS. ISA, ISA. There we go. Sorry about that. So an ISA is an individual savings account, and it's sometimes described as being a tax-free wrapper. What that means is that you will pay your income into an ISA after you've paid income tax on it, so it's been taxed. But any investment returns or growth that you get within an ISA are free from tax. So it's a tax-free wrapper in that sense. You can currently put £20,000 a year into an ISA, and then obviously it's a savings account, so you can access it earlier or in a different way to pensions. So if you go onto the Money Helper website, we've got some links at the back of the slides. They give you lots of other explanations and a bit more detail around these other options as well. You can just use the savings account. Again, it will be your income after tax that goes into a savings account. Usually they're not very high rate of interest, but very easily accessible. So we've got an ISA, which I'm trying to leave over there for like more long-term things, and then we've got a small savings account that we kind of dip into if we need to for, you know, things like a new fridge, freezer, or whatever. Some people invest in property. I can't even comment on this. Property, I believe, is not as lucrative as it used to be, but people will look at that as another option for, excuse me, for pension, for building up a portfolio for pension income, and maybe looking at you renting them out or selling them on later on. So property is another option that people do look at as well. And then there might be other things. So there might be things such as premium bonds. We might buy lottery tickets and pray. There's something as well called a LISA, an LISA, which is a lifetime individual savings account. You can open one of these if you are under the age of 40. It's primarily for first-time buyers, but you don't have to be a first-time buyer on the property market. If you don't use it to buy your first property, then you can't access it until you are, I think it is 60. So it then becomes a bit like an income at retirement. But up to a certain amount, for every amount that you save, the government will give you an extra 25%. So it's quite a nice way to save. It's a good way to get young people saving as well, for first properties and stuff. So that's something else that you can look up as well, an LISA. Okay. Any questions on any of those options? It'd just be important to mention those to you. No, we okay? All right. Let's look then. Oh, hello. Hi, Simon. So if you have additional property savings and an ISA, I'm guessing you're not on the call. Probably don't need to be, do you, if we've got all of that going on? There there is a view that people have. I kind of have it. It's kind of quite good to have a couple of different things if you can. So not necessarily all eggs in one basket, but again, it has to work for you and your circumstances. What types of ISA are there? So there's lots of different types. You get stocks and shares ISA. You can have cash builder ISA. There's junior ISAs for kids. There's the lifetime ISA that I've talked about, the LISA. There's lots of different sorts, and again, they all do different things. So you just need to have a bit of a research into what works best. Some of them have restrictions on them, so you can't take any money out for 5 years, for example. Some of them you can only take so much out at a time. They're all different. They're all kind of quite different. So good idea to just kind of, as I say, just Google, have a look at Money Helper, and that will tell you the different options available. You can, of course, use a financial advisor. You do pay for that, which might be absolutely fine, but it also might be unnecessary. The default position that we have when it comes to finances is I don't know, so I need to pay someone, which might be true, but it also might not be. It might just be by reading some things, like Money Helper, where it's written in quite an easy to understand, plain English way. That is enough for you. So don't jump the gun. Just have a little look and just, as I say, walk, don't run. Okay. So let's talk about the pension bit, because that's what we're here for, really, isn't it? So private savings. So what we're really saying here is that this is where you might choose to pay into another pension outside, completely removed from your NHS pension. And you can do that now. For a little while ago, you couldn't. You could only save into one pension, but now you can have as many pensions as you like, in theory. So you can look at different options. You might see them phrased as personal pensions, sometimes a stakeholder pension. More often than not, the kind of the buzz thing at the moment, if there is such a thing in pensions, is a SIP, or a self-invested personal pension. And you might see that gets referenced sometimes on the Facebook group. Now, they kind of work in a very similar way. Okay, so they're all similar, and that is that it is a defined contribution scheme. So these are those schemes that I was talking to you about earlier. That means they are investment based. So you will pay your contributions, and they will go and become invested on your behalf. And then your value of your pot of money will depend on the investment performance and also what it is invested in. Now, because you would be doing this outside of your NHS pension, the contributions you pay across into these private pensions after you have already paid income tax. So that's an important point. You do still get the tax relief, but you don't get it in the same way that you do on your NHS pension. So if I was paying £100, they would take that, I would pay that £100 after I had been paid my money and paid my tax on it, and that would go into my SIP, and then I would automatically be given 20% back as tax relief, and it goes back into the fund. So they don't give it to me, but they put it into the pension already. Okay, and that's given for everybody gets that 20% relief back. Okay. If you are a 40% taxpayer, if you pay a higher rate of taxes, you will need to claim back the additional 20 or 25% from the HMRC, usually through a self-assessment. So it's just something to be aware of. If you are a higher rate taxpayer and you operate a SIP or a personal pension, you have to claim the additional tax relief back. It's a little bit more admin to do. Now, the way that these pensions work, as we said, is they are invested, and so the value of your fund might go up or down according to investment performance. But let's just say you have a SIP with Vanguard. I'm not particularly promoting Vanguard, it's the first one that came into my head. Then all of these companies that offer SIPs or personal pensions, they have to be able to provide that, so you have to pay for that service. So you pay for that service through what they call a fee. Now, that might be called a management fee or a platform fee or a fund fee or something like that, but there will be a fee that you pay. And it is usually a percentage of the fund. So it might be 0.5% of whatever your pot of money is, they will take off you as a charge. So not all pension schemes in this sense are created equally. because they will all have a different charging rate and basis. And they will all also have different success. And what I mean by that is different rates of investment returns. So again, it's something that you might need to look at what is the fee, how much do I want to pay in, what funds do I want? Do I want to manage the investments myself? Probably not, most people don't. Do I want the provider to manage them for me? What does that look like? Again, it's a case of reading. 99% of people have the provider manage investments because we don't feel confident in managing investments. I am one of those people. I'm not an investment person, I'm a pensions person. So I let the fund manager do that. Okay. Hi, Simon. Great question. So Simon's question is a Nest pension classed as private? Yes. So Nest sort of falls into private savings because it's outside of the NHS pension scheme. It sort of comes under the category of a stakeholder or an occupational stakeholder. Occupation because it's linked to work, that's what that means. But yes, it would come under the same category as one of these. So some of you might be in Nest if you do bank work for the agency. Some of you might be in Nest if you left the NHS pension scheme previously and took your benefits. They might put you back into Nest automatically. They're there for locum work. Yeah, there you go. So yes, it's kind of one of these. And if you've not decided, if you've not opted to change the investments or anything, then you'll just be letting them manage the investments, as we said, and they'll be taking the little charge off, and you can see that on the statements. The other good thing about these pensions is accessibility to information and accessibility in how you take the benefits. I'm going to talk to you about how you take the benefits a bit later when we look at the AVC option for NHS pensions, because it's the same principles. But all of these funds have apps that you can use, and they're all accessible online, and you can get real-time information, and it's very exciting, and you become obsessed and start watching it every day. But you can really get the information very quickly at your fingertips with these type of arrangements, which is quite nice. If someone is joining now under the NHS, will they go into 2015 or Nest? So they should now join 2015. Any new entrant, brand new entrant into the NHS, so provided you're employed by the NHS, should go into the 2015 section. Nest was really only there for agency bank workers, but those people who had already taken their pension benefits and wanted to continue working in the NHS. Before April 2023, there was not the option for those people to rejoin the NHS pension scheme, and that's what Nest has primarily been used for. Okay. Right, let's talk about the NHS options then, if everybody's okay with that for now. I'm going to come back to those a bit later, so again, just absorb while we go through. And I'm going to start with additional pension. Okay. So additional pension is very much what it sounds like. It's what it says on the tin. It's kind of that Ron Seal moment, okay? Additional pension is an option within the main NHS pension scheme where you can pay extra contributions yourself. It's just you. Your employer will not do this with you. So it's only you paying the extra contributions. And what that's doing is it's buying you an additional amount of annual pension when you retire. So do you remember when we said before that the NHS pension scheme is a defined benefit scheme and it's paying you an annual income for when you stop work? So if we said my pension is £10,000 a year, I'm going to receive that every year plus inflation for as long as I live. Now I might decide that £10,000 a year is not enough. So I might want to try and get an extra £1,000 per year in my pension to make it £11,000 a year. That's what additional pension does. You're paying extra contributions to buy yourself extra annual pension, okay? You can do that through a lump sum amount. So I don't know, let's say Simon's got £10,000 under his mattress. He might want to put that in, and that would be a lump sum payment. Or you can do it through a regular monthly contribution. Now, with a regular monthly contribution, it comes off your pay in the same way that your normal contribution does at the moment. And so you get the tax relief at that time. If you pay by lump sum, then you have to pay that money across into the pension separately, which is fine. But then what you'll then need to do is claim the tax relief back from HMRC separately. You can choose how long you want to have this arrangement in place for. So if you decide you want to do monthly contributions, you could just do that over 12 months. You could do that over 24 months, you could do it over 36 months and so on. And there's a calculator that I'm going to show you in a moment that you can use to help you determine what looks best for you. As I've said, tax relief at source. So that means that you will get the tax relief at the time that the contribution is taken from your pay. You can also choose with additional pension whether to just have a pension that's provided for you or whether you want to include your dependents in the event of your death. So if you just choose yourself, then when you die, there's no additional pension paid. But if you choose dependents and you die, then there is additional pension paid to those dependents. So that just depends on your circumstances and your option, and it will change the cost or the contribution rate. Okay. So let me swap my screen for a second. So just bear with me. And I'll swap my screen so I can show you something. So I'm going to look slightly the other way, but also try not to. Okay. Now you hopefully will be able to see a screen which is my internet browser. I'm hoping this is right and you can see that. And you'll see at the top there, I've just typed in NHS Pensions Additional Pension. Now this is bringing up, as I mentioned earlier in response to the question that we had at the start from Emma, this is the England and Wales calculator, but you can do the same thing for SPPA as well in HSC. But I just want to show you how easy it is. You just type it literally in the search bar and it will bring it up. Okay, and it brings up NHS Pension, sorry, again. Sorry. So you click on that and it takes you to the Business Services Authority because they have a whole bit on NHS pensions, as you can see. So anything you want to know about NHS pensions, have a look in here. But it talks to you about additional pension. So it's going to tell you all the fancy things I've just told you. And it has a new calculator that you can see here called, which says calculate and apply. Shall we do that? So here we go. So you can see it's telling you what you're going to need to be able to tell them beforehand. It's quite straightforward, actually. We should all know our dates of birth, I would imagine. So it's not too taxing. There's also a fact sheet that they recommend you read before you do this. Now, I'm going to tell you now, nobody ever reads the fact sheet before they do this, because if they did, they would then know how this was working. So just a little thought. But anyway, let's dive straight in. So let's put in our date of birth. So I'm not going to put in exactly my date of birth because, you know, you might steal my identity, but let's just go for a date of birth. Do I have any previous additional pension contracts? So I've never done this before within my NHS pension, so I'm going to say no. Tina earlier mentioned that she does have some already. So in that case, she would say yes. Does that make sense? So I'm going to say no. And then it says, how much additional pension would you like to purchase? And this is where literally everybody in the whole world falls over, okay? It's not asking how much you want to pay. It's asking how much additional annual pension do you want to buy? And then it will tell you how much it will cost. And you have to, so you can increase your annual pension in chunks of £250. So in my example, I said, didn't I wanted an extra £1,000 per annum when I retire. So I'm going to click £1,000. Now you might not know this yet because you haven't seen any of the figures, and that's all right, because as you'll see in a minute, you can play around with it and swap it about. Just pick a number, it gives you somewhere to start. Would I like to add dependent cover? So I'm going to say no, because I don't love my husband that much, okay? Do I want to pay for my additional pension as a single lump sum payment or regular monthly? Well, I don't have any money under the mattress because I spent it all on a fridge freezer. So I'm going to do regular monthly payments, okay? So how many years do I want to pay it for? So that's 1 year. It's a bit misleading, it says instalments. That's 1 year. So I'm not going to retire for like 100 years yet. So I'm going to say 15 years worth of instalments. Okay. So then it's going to show you the details we've put in. So date of birth. I don't have a previous contract. I would like to look at buying an extra £1,000 a year. Don't want anything to go to my husband. I'm going to do it in his instalments and I'm going to do it over 15 years. You can see here on the side, you can change any of these things. So if we have a look, scroll down, what it tells me is I will pay £86.40 a month for the next 15 years to purchase £1,000 worth of extra pension per annum. Okay. Now, that £86.40 a month is before I get any tax relief on that, but I'm going to get tax relief on it. Now, I'm going to say I'm a 20% taxpayer. So I'm just getting out my magic calculator. So that actually is going to cost me £69 a month, or £830 a year, or in total £12,400. Okay, and that will give me an extra £1,000 per annum of pension when I retire. But there's a bit more than that. Okay, it's £1,000, but it's inflation linked. So every year that I pay the contribution, I'll buy a little bit. So if I'm doing £1,000 over 15 years, each year I'm buying about £67 worth of pension. So I buy £67 this year, and then inflation is added onto that. Next year, I'll buy another £67. It's added on to what I've already got with the inflation, and more inflation is added on, and so on. So we have a compound inflation linking. So actually, in 15 years, I won't have bought £1,000. It will probably be more like £1,500. Okay, because it keeps that inflation link. So the longer you do it for, the more the inflation builds up on it as well. Okay, so some people say, well, that's a rip-off, isn't it? You've paid 12 grand and you've got £1,200 worth of pension. I'm like, yes, but I receive that £1,200 every year that I'm alive to receive it. So if I live for 20 years, I will have received £24,000 worth of pension. I didn't pay £24,000. So really what we say is, generally, if you're going to live more than 9 years or so, then you get a very good rate of return. Okay, does depend on how long you're going to live for. Now, in addition, when you take your 2015 pension benefits, you can choose to swap some of that pension for a lump sum. And the higher your pension is, the more lump sum you can take. So by doing additional pension, you will actually effectively be able to take a higher lump sum amount if you want to, because your annual pension will be higher. Okay. Now, if I don't want to do £1,000 because I've decided, I don't want to do it over 15 years because I've decided that's far too long, I can just click change and say, right, I'm going to do it over 10, and it will recalculate. I can also then go, I don't want to do £1,000 anymore. I want to do 750, and it will recalculate. And so it does all of those things. So you can just go in and play around with it as many times as you like. Again, it's telling you to read the fact sheet. And then you can, when you've decided what you want to do, and you've got that on the screen there, you click print your form, and it will print you a PDF form for you then to fill in, and you follow the instructions and send it to payroll and so on. Okay, and that's how that works. It's a really great tool for you to see what it's doing and your options. So I'm now just going to jump back to the slides, if you can all bear with me. And then I'm going to look at the questions for additional pension. Okay. A little screenshot there, look, of what we've just done. Okay, so questions. Bear with me. Louisa, if you are in the higher tax brackets, can you pay more in your pension to bring your tax rate down? And would this affect your 95 salary? So yes, you can. So as we mentioned before, by paying pension contributions, they're taken off your pay before your income tax is calculated. So let's say that your pay was 53,000. after taking off your normal pension contributions, you would pay 40% tax on a little bit of that. But if you paid £1,000 into additional pension, for example, you could get the full tax relief on that. So you get the 40% tax relief plus a bit on 20%. It's whatever the tax rate pulls you into. Doesn't affect the other pensions because the other pensions are calculated based on pensionable pay, not taxable pay. Can you make additional payments to 95 or 2015? 1995 is closed now. All it does is grow by being linked to your current pay. So your only option is additional pension in 2015. So 95 and 2008 you cannot add to anymore unless you already have an active added years contract, and I'll come on to that in a second. Should you return before normal pension age? Would you lose a lot of additional pension? Do you mean retire? Yeah, there we go. Sorry, I just caught up, Jackie. If you retire before normal pension age, do you lose a lot? So if you, these figures that we've looked at assume that you take the pension at the normal pension age, which is state pension age. If you want to take the pension at 60, then you can, as you can do with your 2015 benefits anyway, and the early retirement factor would apply. So it's the standard early retirement factor as you get on the benefits. So in our case, if I wanted £1,000, if I was doing £1,000 at 67, but I decided I wanted to take it at 60, I would get like £710 instead, because it would be reduced for that early payment, because again, it's going to be paid to you across more years. So yeah, you do need to factor in, if you're going to take it a bit earlier, it's going to adjust according to the early retirement factor. Jackie, go and have a drink. Sandy, I've got survivor pension on my statements, but I don't have any dependents. Can I cancel it? No. Once you start a contract, you can't amend it. You can stop it. So what you could do is stop it, and you would be credited with the bit that you've paid for, and then you could start a new one without survivor benefits. If you want, you could look at that. Maybe use the calculator so you can see what that would look like. But you can't change the one that you've started, but you could stop it. Sandra, I have taken partial retirement. I want to buy additional pension to keep my tax under the higher band. How would I calculate this figure? So what you need to do there, we're not going to do it in the session today, is you need to understand the income tax rates, and you need to understand what your taxable income is. So let's say, as I said in that example before, if your total income was 53,000, you're a little bit into the 40% tax bracket, you can just pay enough contribution to pull you below the threshold. So you just need to Google what the tax thresholds are so you can see that. I think we've got posts on it actually on the Facebook group about before. If you Google tax, it should, use the search function. It should bring up the posts that are relevant. Can you convert the additional pension into a lump sum? So not all of it, Simon. As we said, you can proportion some of it. So if you take additional pension, it will increase the lump sum you can take. Jolene, when doing your partial retirement, can you request at the same time of retirement additional pension to start your 2015 going forward? Yes, but it's two separate processes. So you can do your partial retirement, and you can then also do the additional pension calculator and fill the form in and submit it all together. Yes, you can do that. Depends on how good your employer is. They might get confused. I might be inclined to leave a month between them and do them separately. But yes, there's nothing to stop you doing it in theory. Hello, Victoria. Took 1995 pension but carried on working, so started paying into Nest, but froze it when allowed to rejoin the NHS scheme. Can I put lump sums into Nest? So Nest is still an occupational scheme. So because it's occupational, it's linked to your employment. So if you're not paying into Nest through your employment, they might not allow you to pay contributions into Nest now. But if you have a look on the Nest website, it will tell you if that is an option for you. I think it might not be, but do check. Hello, Tina. Can you input something into additional pension contributions already, please? I tried to add more additional pension. They go, oh, okay. Yeah, 2 seconds. Jumping back, everyone. So I think what Tina is asking, and I'm sure she's going to jump in and tell me if I'm a lunatic at this point, is where's she gone? There she is. If I change this to yes, I've got a previous contract. So it says if you have multiple additional pension contracts, enter the total amount. So how much are you already buying, Tina? So let's, I don't know, let's say 500. Okay. And then it goes on and says, how much would you like to buy? So let's go back to the thousands. So just doing what we did before. No, because I don't like my husband. I should stress I love my husband dearly, just in case anyone ever watches this. 10 years. It doesn't change the amounts, Tina. It doesn't change how much it's going to cost. The reason it asks is because there is a limit on the maximum that you can buy in additional pension, which is £8,000. So if I, oh, not that one. If I change this, oh my God, sorry everyone. Right. If I change this and say I'm already buying £8,000 worth of additional pension, and I want to buy, see, it limits how much I can buy now, because the most I can buy in total is 8,575. So that's why it's asking. So if you're not anywhere near that, you'll be absolutely fine. But it's just because it's making sure you don't buy too much. That's what it's doing. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Back to slides, then back to questions. I've got so many sets of slides open, I don't want to put the wrong ones on the screen. That would be hilarious. Right, so Tina, hopefully that made sense. Is there an age limit for dependents? So the dependent pension is the same rules as the main scheme. I don't want to get into this too much because people start disagreeing with me, but so it's a spouse or partner. And then if you've got any children under the age of 23, they count as a dependent. So they don't get the full amount of your added pension, they get a percentage of it as they would do the normal pension benefits. Okay. Hello Stacey, I'm in the NHS hub and it has changed my scheme. I have everything 1995. Oh, yep, that's right. Also states no information recorded for all areas under current benefit tabs. My decision to pay extra will be based on what I may get and when. How do I get the info on the hub updated? So I don't think the hubs have been fully updated yet. I think they're trying to do them this month. It won't project forwards for you. The thing about the hub and your total reward statement or your annual statement, if you're in SPPA and HSC, is that they're not projecting your pension forwards for you. They're just telling you what you've built up so far. So if you're not retiring for another 15 years, for example, it's not going to be very helpful because it's not telling you the future amount. You have to work that out yourself by reading the scheme guides. I think we've covered that one about dependents. It gets rather expensive when you have 5 years left. Well, that's right, Astrid, because you've got less years to pay for it, haven't you? So ultimately, you'd still be paying the same sort of similar amounts. It is an age-related factor. So that also makes a difference as well. But also you're doing it over less years. So obviously it does get more expensive. Pennies are dropping for you, Tina. I've watched this on YouTube twice. Oh, bless you. It's definitely an iterative process. It's not watch it once and know it all. It really isn't. I've been doing this a long time, but it's definitely go back and do it again and again and again. The additional payment does go into 2015. Yes. Is the additional pension included if you claim your pension early? Yes, it is, Emma, again with the early retirement reduction. Natalie, if your circumstances change, can you stop? Yes, you can, and you will be credited with the bit that you've paid for. Catherine, if I had a lump sum from my 95 pension, will I get another lump sum from this additional pension? So with 2015, you can choose to take some of that as a lump sum. So as I've already said, if you're paying more 2015 pension, you can take more 2015 lump sum. Yes. Do you pay tax on your wage and partial drawdown pension payments? Yes, you do, Amanda, but that's not what we're talking about today. The NHS Scotland calculator only works on a computer, not a phone or an iPad. Brilliant. Excellent, Andrew. You could probably use the England calculator. It might be slightly different to Scotland just because your factors on life expectancy are a little bit different. But it wouldn't be a million miles away. Could you buy additional pension with the lump sum from the 95 question? Great question, Astrid. No, not really. It's semantics, okay? And the reason being is, as we know, our lump sum is tax-free. Brilliant. We also know that when we pay into a pension, we get tax relief on our contributions. So, you know, probably not totally unexpected. HMRC don't really like you to get tax relief on the lump sum, having had tax relief when you paid the contributions in, to then get more tax relief if you put that lump sum back into another pension. They're not so keen on that. So you can't really do that. It's called pensions recycling rules, and you have to be really careful you don't come a cropper, because it can be a bit of a disaster on the tax front if you do. However, what you could do as a suggestion is for a year or 2 years, pay the majority of your salary into additional pension and live off your lump sum, and that would be all right, as an example. Are there times when it's good to come out of the 95 or 2008 sections to bank the highest years on the full-time pay and go back in? Paul, that is not what we are talking about today, but, and I can't answer that because it depends on circumstances, probably not. Thank you for the link, Catherine. You're all very on the ball, very helpful, many assistants. Is there any negative to additional pension, says Jackie? Depends on when you die, Jackie, to be honest with you. I mean, if you're somebody who is ill, for example, and think you've got quite a short life expectancy, probably not going to get your money back. But if you think you've got a reasonable life expectancy, then not really, because it's the rate of return is quite good and it's inflation linked and it's paid for life and all that. But as with anything to do with pensions like this, you're always gambling with longevity, you know, and that's just the thing that you kind of have to weigh up. Also, the other thing might be dependent benefits. So as we've said, you can choose dependent benefits or not. That changes the cost. Also, if you die, there's only a proportion of those benefits are paid to those dependents, and you might want to look at something else if that isn't sufficient. So they're probably the things mainly to consider. Can you buy additional pension over less years than you have to work? Yeah, you can choose. So you can say, well, I'm going to work 8 years, but I want to buy it over 2. That's fine. You choose. Using the calculator, how does it look if you already are paying additional pension? It asks for a figure, but I'm not sure if this is per year or per month. Okay, so I just demonstrated that, Errol. I don't know if you missed it, but essentially it would be the amount of additional pension you're purchasing. So if you're purchasing an extra £1,000 of extra pension, that's what you put in that calculator. And it's just making sure that you're not buying too much. That's all it is. Okay. So that's additional pension. So play with the calculator. It's quite new, that calculator. It's infinitely better than the other one. Lots of fun. You can just go in and out of it as many times as you like. Please don't apologise. It's fine. Lots of stuff going on. So that's additional pension. So things to think about. How long are you going to live for? Obviously. What do you want to do about dependents? And the cost, obviously. So they're things that you can kind of play around with and have a look at. Just very quickly, one of the questions I had was, can we add to the 1995 section? And I very succinctly said no. Now, there used to be a thing in 1995 called added years. So very briefly, the 1995 pension is calculated using your service in years and days and your pay. Now, therefore, there used to be an arrangement where you could pay extra contributions to buy yourself extra years and days. So our example here we've got on the slide is 2 years and 6 months, for example, or 2 years, 180 something days. So by increasing your service in the scheme, you would be increasing the pension benefits. Added years ceased to be an option in 2008. So no new arrangements were allowed after 2008. But if you had an arrangement in place, you are able to continue with that. So some of you may already be doing added years, and that is still increasing your 1995 benefits, even though you might now be in 2015, and you're able to continue with those because it's a legacy benefit. Okay. Right. Let's do my favourite thing in the entire world, said no one ever. Let's talk about an ERRBO. Just out of interest, anybody heard of ERRBO before? Yeah. Few people? Excellent. Very good, everyone. Oh, that was I suddenly got loads of thumbs up then. Does anybody actually understand how it works? That's very honest, Katrina. Yeah, perfect. I'm going to tell you now nobody understands an ERRBO. No, that's not true. Some people might do. Just saying. Very few people do. Even financial advisors do not understand the ERRBO. Okay, so it's really important that we do this because I want you to really understand what it is. So I'm going to go slow, but I need you to jump in with your questions if you're not sure. Because sometimes people say to me, I'm going to do an ERRBO, and I go, okay, do you know how it works? Well, no, not really, but I want, yeah, well, okay. So an ERRBO stands for Early Retirement Reduction Buyout. What the fluff? Okay, so let's rewind a little bit. All of the schemes have a normal pension age. And the normal pension age for 2015 is state pension age. Let's just call that 67 for the moment, okay? But it was whatever your state pension age is. So you can access and you can take your 2015 benefits before state pension age, but they would be reduced for early payment because the scheme says, oh, I'm going to pay Laura a pension for 3 years longer than I was planning to. So we're going to reduce the pension to account of those extra years. That's how it works. So what an ERRBO is in very simple terms, it's a mechanism where you can pay additional contributions and get tax relief on them, like we talked about before. And you can then access your pension earlier without a reduction or with a smaller reduction because you're kind of paying for that reduction in advance. Does that sort of make sense? Yeah, excellent. Okay. There is a lot more to it than that, but that's the basic principle of what it is. So when we're saying an early retirement reduction buyout, we're going to early retire. There's a reduction, but we're not going to have the reduction because we're going to pay more now to buy out that reduction in advance, kind of paying for it early on. Yeah. Does that make sense now? Let's go with it. So, early retirement reduction buyout. Okay, this is me here. So what does it mean? You pay monthly contributions, as we've said, so you have to do this monthly. And it has to start from the start of a scheme year. So a scheme year starts on the 1st of April. Okay, don't leave it till the last minute if you can help it, but it starts on the 1st of April. Okay, and what it does is you pay more money into your pension now so that you can access it earlier without a reduction or with less of a reduction. Okay, so that's what it's trying to do. So let's say I want to take my 2015 benefits at 65 instead of 67, they would be reduced because I was taking them 2 years early. But I could do an ERRBO, pay extra contributions now, and then at 65, get the pension that it would have been at 67. Does that make sense? So anybody who's joined the scheme can do it within the first 3 months of joining. For everybody else, it's within the first 3 months of the start of the scheme year. So as I said, the scheme year is the 1st of April. So you need to get this in place before July, but it will be backdated to the 1st of April. So you'll have to pay all the 3 months contributions in one go if you do it in July. So that's why I would say do it in advance. So it starts on the 1st of April and then you're paying the contributions just 1 month at a time. It's only available in the 2015 section. Okay, so it's not available in any of the other sections. It's unique to 2015. As we mentioned before, but just to really hammer the point home, you do get tax relief on the contributions that you pay. There is, I'm not going to demonstrate it because we've done enough calculators tonight, but again, if you go onto your NHS Pensions website, there is a calculator or fact sheet for ERRBO, which talks about how much the contributions will cost as well. So what is defined as early? Just to be clear, your normal pension age, that's NPA, is your state pension age. So if you want to take your 2015 benefits before that point, which I'm sure most of us will want to, then that is classed as early. Okay, so we've got that right. There's a few things to be aware of now we've got that. Katrina, I'm not ignoring your question. I'm going to come to it in a second, if that's okay. So it operates on a year-on-year basis. Okay, so we need to understand this. This is really important. So the 2015 scheme itself builds up each year based on your pensionable pay in that year. So you have an amount of pension in year one, and then in year two, you build up another amount of pension and they get added together, and then in year three and so on. So each year you're building up the pension like that. And each year of pension that you've built up has a normal pension age of state pension age. When you do an ERRBO, what you're doing is you're buying yourself an earlier retirement age. So let's say 65. But that only applies to the years that you've paid the ERRBO contributions for. So you've all now been in the 2015 scheme since the 1st of April 22. So if you start an ERRBO next April, that is April 25. So your ERRBO only applies to that bit of your 2015 pension after April next year. So what it would mean is that you would have 3 years of 2015 pension that still has a normal pension age of state pension age, but the rest of the pension would have a normal pension age of 65 in my example, or for as many years as you did the ERRBO for. And then if you stop doing the ERRBO, then again, when you're not paying the contributions, the bit after that has a normal pension age of state pension age again. Does that make sense? So it's only applicable to the years that you've paid the contributions for. Okay. Another rule is that you can't buy more than 3 years early. So if my state pension age is 68, I could buy minus 1 year, which would be 67, minus 2 years, which would be 66, or minus 3 years, which would be 65. I cannot do minus 4 years to 64. Also, you cannot go below 65 on an ERRBO. So if your state pension age is 67, you can actually only do 2 years because the maximum you can go to is 65. The other thing to be aware of is you're not buying an age for these benefits. You're buying the number of years early. So if your state pension age is currently 68 and you're buying 3 years early, that is 65. But if your state pension age goes up to 69, then your ERRBO also goes up to 66 because it's the number of years early. Have we all got that? Yeah, okay. I'm just going to do the questions, okay. So, Catherine, do you have to pay ERRBO each year? So I would need to pay it from now until retirement? Yes. If you don't, say you did it for 5 years, those 5 years that you've paid it for would have an ERRBO on it, an earlier retirement date, but the rest of your 2015 does not. So that's what you need to be aware of. Sarah, can you do an ERRBO and additional pension? Absolutely, you can do both of those, that is fine. Susan, why would you do this over paying additional pension? Good question. And as I said at the start of the session, this is not an advice session, so I cannot advise. I'm going to give you some more information as well that will make you repeat that question. Is that every April? Yes, Heidi, if you want it to apply to your 2015 benefits going forwards, you have to do it every year. What if the pension age changes? I think we've covered that, Katrina. It will change as well. Jackie, if you had an ERRBO taking you to retire at, say, 65, yes, good question. If I decide to retire earlier than 65, would my first early year reduction start at 65? Yeah, so what Jackie's saying in here is that the normal pension age is 67. So if she takes her pension at 64, that would be 3 years early. So you'd have an early retirement factor for 3 years. But if you do an ERRBO, which is 65, you can still take the pension at 64 and it would be reduced for early payment, but it's only reduced by the 1 year early because you've already paid for taking it at 65. Does that make sense? It moves the age round. So the issue that you're going to have with an ERRBO, or one of them, is that your parts of your 2015 benefits are going to have different normal pension ages. So you need to be aware, and that makes planning really hard, and it makes getting estimates really hard because and we run them, and we hate it because we've got to split the calculation and split the compound interest, and to try and work out which proportion has a retirement factor and which doesn't. So that it's quite hard to work through. Samantha, in theory, the idea is it works out to be the same cost as for early retirement, but it's not quite true because the factor that they use to calculate your contribution for your ERRBO is based on your age. So the younger you are, the cheaper it is. But every year it changes. So, for example, if you started a contract in April and it was 3.24%, for example, for your contribution, the next year it will go up to 3.25, and then it might go up to 3.28, and then so it goes up each year that you age because you're older. Okay, so it's not fixed either. So Derling, if you buy it for 2 years from 2025 and your pension age is 67, is that 65? It would be yes, but only from 2025 onwards. The bit of 2015 before 2025 is still 67. It's going to split your pension ages. Okay. I'm just hearting the ones I've answered. Is there a calculator to work out the cost each month? I can't remember if they've got a calculator or if it's just a fact sheet. Bear with me, I'm just going to do a quick check for you while I'm here. No, there's no calculator. There's a fact sheet. So if you just Google NHS Pension ERRBO, it will bring up the ERRBO section to the website. And there's a fact sheet on there, and there's also a form to fill in, which is called an expression of interest form, and send off. And then the pension scheme will send you some information. Okay, so let me just recap on where we are. Your ERRBO only applies to the years going forwards. The contribution percentage is going to increase each year. You can only buy up to a maximum of either 3 years early or 65. We all with me so far? If your state pension age changes, your ERRBO age is going to change as well. All right, Tina, I have to do it. The other thing is what happens if you die or you ill health retire. Would anybody like to hazard a guess? Yeah, 100%, you lose it. Right, because if you don't remember, your ERRBO is allowing you to take your pension unreduced from an earlier age. It doesn't affect the dependents' benefits. So if you start doing an ERRBO and pay, I don't know, 4 grand in ERRBO contributions over 5 years, and then you drop dead before you take the pension or very early into taking the pension, nobody gets the benefit of those contributions. Similarly, if you were awarded an ill health retirement, what an ill health retirement does is it pays you the benefits unreduced. So therefore, again, you've paid ERRBO contributions for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Now, obviously, these are extreme circumstances, and we are ultimately hoping you will not drop dead before you receive your pension, or you will not have to finish work due to ill health. But unlike the other options, which do cater for that, this does not. So you have to think very carefully, see Tina's comment, as to whether ERRBO is the right solution for you. Doesn't go back to the government, it stays in the NHS pension scheme to pay out the benefits in the pension scheme. I can see that Tina has researched this quite fully. So nobody gets this and how it works. Okay. Now, I'm not saying it's pointless, because I can't say that, but I wouldn't say that. It's definitely a thing in certain circumstances, and it can work really well for some people. But before you go into this, you need to be 100% certain what it is that you're signing up for, because I will almost guarantee what I've just told you tonight is not what you thought it was before you came on this session. Am I right? Yes, you are all very welcome. Right, because Tina has requested so nicely, let's move along and we will talk about Prudential AVCs. It does say Prudential, it's a bit of a lie actually, because it's also Standard Life, but we'll just pretend that's fine. So remember, AVCs are a defined contribution scheme. So we've talked about them a little bit already, but I want to talk to you about them a bit more, especially about how they work. So it's one of these defined contribution schemes, which means it's investment based, the same as the SIP and Nest and the personal pension. So what I'm going to tell you about how they work applies to all of those things. The one difference is that if you do an AVC through Standard Life or Prudential, they're your options at the moment. Again, you can Google it, NHS Pension AVC, and it'll bring it up. Is that again, where you're making contributions directly from your pay, the tax relief is all sorted for you at that time. Unlike if you remember what we said for the SIPs and stuff earlier, you kind of have to claim some of that back possibly. So it's just something to be aware of. So the AVC, again, you're paying extra contributions and it's going to give you extra benefits. You can do this by lump sum as well, or regular contributions. They're super flexible, these though. They don't define the rate or how much you have to pay like additional pension. So you can say, in theory, I'm going to pay £50 this month, £100 next month. I'm going to stop for 3 months and then going to pay £4,000. I'm going to pay nothing. You can be really flexible like that. Now, payroll are not going to thank you for that. We'll probably say, please don't do that. But the point is, you can start them, you can stop them, you can increase them, you can decrease them depending on your circumstances. So there is a lot more flexibility there. And the reason being is because it's building up in this investment pot for you. As I said before, you will get the tax relief through payroll, so it's a little bit tidier. Again, if you do decide to do a lump sum payment, that's absolutely fine. You know, when Simon whips out his 10 grand from under his mattress, but again, it's the same rule as before. You will need to claim the tax relief back from HMRC for lump sum payments. When you then come to take your defined contribution benefits, you've got quite a lot of different options. So you can make different choices depending on your circumstances. And this is where it does get a little bit different to additional pension, for example. So what happens in all defined contribution schemes, not just the AVC, is that you pay in your contributions. This is this first column here. You might remember what I said before is that there is a management charge or a fund charge or whatever fancy name they're going to call it, where they're going to take a little bit off. And that covers the cost of running the investment option. Okay, so you'll see that come off. Hopefully you'll get some investment growth. So that means that you'll get some interest rates of return. As I mentioned before, it might do a bit of an upsy downsy on the way there, but the idea is it should go up over time. And then when we take into account all of those things, you've got a total account or a total fund or pot of money. Okay, and that is your defined contribution pension pot. Okay, now with that pot, you've then got different options that you can take. Okay, and we've shown some of them here. Now with all of these options, so all of these defined contribution schemes, you can take 25% of the value as a tax-free lump sum. So let's just say, to keep it simple, my AVC is £50,000. Fun. I can take 25% of that tax-free. So that would, in my example, by my maths, would be what, about £12,000, something like that. Okay. Now, I can take that currently anytime from 55, and I do not have to take it at the same time as my NHS benefits. So whether that's an AVC, a SIP, Nest, whatever it is, you can access that anytime from 55 currently, totally separate to anything else that you've got going on. That 55 though is increasing to 57 from April 28. So I'm saying 55 now, but if you're super young like me, then it's actually going to go up to 57 from April 28 and is then going to track 10 years behind state pension age. So that means mine's actually going to be 58, which is quite depressing, but there you go. So I can take 25% as a tax-free lump sum, and then I can do nothing. I can leave the rest of it, or I can then start to access it. So I'm going to jump to the end first. You can purchase an annuity. Now, an annuity is a pension, basically. So you go to your provider or an insurance company and you say, take my £50,000 and it will buy me a regular annual income as a pension. Okay, that's what an annuity is. Now, just to give you an idea, it sounds good, doesn't it, having £50,000? But if I had £50,000 and say I wanted to use all of it to buy an annuity, that would probably buy me about £1,800 per year. Which is not great. It's not a lot, is it? And it's because they're assuming that I'm going to live for about 27 years and they've got to factor that in and all those kinds of things. If I then say, right, I also want to provide a dependence benefit in the event of my death, then the amount it provides me goes down. If I say that I want it to increase every year in payment by inflation, then the amount goes down again, or it could be level, in which case it's the same amount all the way through. All these things make a difference to the amount of annuity you can purchase. So annuities are great, but the reason I wanted to give you that example is because quite often people compare the NHS pension with a pot of money, but that pot of money actually doesn't go very far when you think about how long you might live for. But you can do that. The other thing you can do is something called drawdown. And drawdown is basically, it enables you to pull out your money in chunks. So let's say I've taken my 25% tax-free, I then might take out another 20 grand. And then the following year I might take out 5 grand and so on. And you just keep pulling it out essentially until you've run out. Now, you will get taxed on that. Anything over the 25% is assessed for income tax. So you do need to be aware of that. So if I wanted to pull all of my 50 grand out at once, I would get 25% of it tax-free, but I would pay income tax on the rest of it. So you need to think about other income that you've had in the tax year. You need to think about spreading it over 2 tax years. There's different ways that you need to manage it. These funds, though, can be quite a good option as a bridge. So people sometimes use it as a bridge short term. So you can do an annuity for 5 years instead of for life, for example. So that means that you could say, well, I'll retire early and live off my defined contribution scheme until I want to take my NHS pension. Or I'll have my annuity until my state pension kicks in at state pension age, because then I've got another source of income. So they're quite flexible and you can choose different ways to pay in, as we said before, and different ways to take the benefits. The other thing about these schemes as well is that in the event of your death, the whole fund is paid back. So if your fund was worth 50,000 and then you died, then that whole 50,000 is paid to who you've nominated to receive it. So for those of you who don't have dependents, then sometimes the AVC can look like a more attractive option because of those flexibilities. There's no right or wrong with any of these things. It's just about understanding what might suit your circumstances better. Right, let me go back to the questions. I've got those slides. Hopefully we've sorted that. Sorry. Katrina, oh, very good, Katrina. Katrina is very on the ball this evening. Could you use it to bridge the gap between taking 95 section at 60 and retiring and getting 2015 at 67 and whatever? Absolutely. In my head, it makes a lot of sense that they're a bridge. They're never going to be big enough to support your income, you know, on a long-term basis, but on a bridge, it's quite a good. Or, you know, if you've got the mortgage to pay off and you want to get rid of a big expense, or gift it to dependents. So there's no inheritance tax, you know, before you die, blah, blah, blah. There's different things you can do with it. And so they are super flexible. It's just kind of looking at those options. Sandra, is it true that the tax-free lump sum stops at 85? No, so the tax-free lump sum is a bit complicated. The tax-free lump sum is kind of always tax-free, but if you haven't taken your pension benefits by 75 under the current rules, then there could be a separate tax charge to pay. So even if you've taken the tax-free amount and you've still got the other pension benefits there and you've not taken them at 75, that can trigger an event sometimes. So 75 is currently the current cut-off. So what some people do is just don't take them at all and then just leave them into dependents in the event of their death. Again, you just got to explore the different options that are available. So again, if you want to do an AVC, what you can do is type NHS Pensions AVC into Google and it will bring up the different options. It will bring up details about Prudential and Standard Life and also the different ways in which you can put them into place. Okay. Very quickly then, I just want to talk about the annual allowance before we finish. So the annual allowance, usually people haven't heard of this, and that's fine. The annual allowance is the limit on the tax-free savings you can have in a tax year. And it's a bit of a complicated calculation. The reason we mention it is because if you start paying extra into your pension, you want to make sure that you are not going to breach the allowance, because if you do, then you will end up paying some tax on that, which means effectively any tax relief that you got on the contributions, you've effectively had to just pay the tax back on some of it. So it's all right being over the allowance, so long as you understand that's what's happening. Now, for most people, even paying extra into the pension, this is not going to be an issue. Unless you're looking at paying really massive amounts in 1 year as a lump sum, then it might be worth getting a check done. The annual allowance at the moment is currently set at 60,000, which sounds like a lot, but for schemes like the NHS, it's not about the contribution that you've paid in, it's about the growth in the pension benefits. So it's about how much you're adding to your annual pension in a year times 16. So let's just say, for example, my 2015 pension at the start of this year was £10,000, and at the end of this year it's going to be £12,000. I've added £2,000 to my pension in that year. I've then got to times that by 16, and that then is 32,000, and that's the growth in my pension. So we just need to be a little bit careful. If we're planning on doing a lot, then we might just need to check it. But to be honest, if you're what I'll call a moderate earner, so kind of 70,000 and below, you haven't had a massive pay increase due to a promotion or anything like that, and you're not looking at buying 8 grand's worth of additional pension, it's probably not going to be an issue for you. But do just kind of do your checks on that as well, just to make sure that it's not going to cause you any big issues. Okay, it's just, I don't want you to come back and bite you just because you weren't aware of something. But for most people, it still is not going to affect you. Okay, it affects those that quite high earners. Okay, so just to recap, we talked about some non-pension stuff. We talked about private pension savings, additional pension with super swanky calculator, ERRBO, and just, ERRBO. AVCs with Prudential and Standard Life, and a little bit about annual allowance, just so that we know what we're doing. At the back of the slides, we've got some links. These are all England, sorry, Scotland. But again, you can just use Google. Google is your absolute friend. You can also go onto the Facebook group and search for any of these terms, and we've done posts on all of them, so they will all come up, and also questions and posts from other people as well. My contact details are here. Take a photograph of it. Because if you haven't received the slides, because they were sent out earlier, you'll need to email me and then I can send them back to you. They might have got lost in the special ether that they get stuck in sometimes, but have a look at that as well. Just a reminder, none of this was financial advice. It was just about giving you the key fundamental principles of how each of them work, so that you can kind of pick through it. Questions then? If you've got to leave, totally understand. Hello, Helen. I'm in 95 in 2015 and I'm 53 next week. Happy birthday. After following the Facebook page, I now know I'll do partial retirement at 60. I'll then use the pension of 95 to make up my pay to what I was earning before. Lovely. It's an absolute no-brainer, isn't it? Would be nice if I could fully retire at 62. So nearer the time, I need to try and work out what to do if I have a shortfall of 5 years. Yeah, so what you need to do is look at, well, actually, what would the pension be at 62? Is that enough? If not, what are my options? You might look at the pension at 62 and go, champion, that's excellent. I don't need to do anything else. It's just a case of working through that position of what do I need? How much am I going to get? That sort of thing. What if you get a large financial gift from a parent downsizing their house? Are you asking me if you can put that into the pension, Katrina? If you are, you can claim tax relief on pension contributions up to 100% of your income, or £60,000 a year. So remember, you've got to factor in your NHS contributions into that as well. So in theory, you could invest that into a pension, but remember that you might not get tax relief on all of it, depending on how much it was. Hello, Judith. I took 2 small private pensions at 55, so my annual allowance dropped to 10k. So buying additional pension may be a problem for me, question mark. No. So you're right, your annual allowance drops when you take your defined contribution pensions, but it only drops for defined contribution pensions. So you can't pay more than £10,000 into a defined contribution pension, but it doesn't have any impact on your NHS pension or additional pension because that is not defined contribution. So you can proceed as you like. Emma, you are more than welcome. You have been an excellent attendee. Thank you. Carl, so I look at last year and this year, calculate difference and multiply by 16. Correct, Carl. It's not exact, but it will give you, it's good enough. Why 16? Because when the annual allowance is the limit on the growth in your pension benefits, okay? When you receive your NHS pension, because it's an annual income, you don't receive it once. You receive it for as long as you live. So HMRC decided that was going to be 16 years when they take account for all the mortality rates and fancy things we don't really fully talk about. So it just is, okay? So that's why, it's because you're going to receive it for multiple years. Louisa, what do you charge for a one-to-one? Depends on what you want. If you want to chat for 25 minutes with one of our consultants, it's £82.50 plus VAT. Currently, inside information is that is going up. If you want a full report, which includes analysis, possibly looking at different pension options, what your pension would look like, additional pension, AVCs, all that kind of stuff, that's called modelling. And we can do that with a report and calculations, and then we would have a meeting with you to discuss the report, and that is around £450 plus VAT, unless you are a higher earner and have lots of pensions tax annual allowance issues, and then it's more because it's harder. Phil, you are more than welcome. Phil is very active on our Facebook group. Susan, you are more than welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I'm not skipping the thank yous. That makes me sound really rude, doesn't it? I'm just trying to see if I've got any questions I've missed. If you are one of those high earners, you will be buying tax and wealth management advice. Probably, but not always, to be honest. Lots come to us for reports. So they just want to know more about their pension. Brilliant, Jackie, excellent. So Jackie, for everybody who's sitting there feeling like they need to go neck a bottle of wine, Jackie said that this is the second time listening and she gets it now. So this is really good. Alan, what percentage is lump sum? What do you mean, Alan? What percentage of what? Helen, you're more than welcome. The ERRBO thing is so important because people just don't know what it is. Can you pay pensions from previous workplaces into the NHS pension, Anna? You can, provided it happens within the first 12 months of joining the NHS pension. That is called a transfer in. But if you have been in the NHS pension for more than 12 months, it is not an option anymore. Sorry. More than welcome. Lump sum at retirement of pension. Okay, so when you take your pension benefits at retirement, Alan, and we'll do this just because we're at the end and then I'll stop. You, in the 95 section, you get a standard lump sum that is 3 times your pension. You can choose to take a higher lump sum, and the maximum lump sum you can take from 95 is the annual pension times 5.36, and that is the maximum lump sum you can take. If you're in the other 2 sections, so 2008 and 2015, you take the annual pension, you times it by 30 and you divide it by 7. And that is the maximum lump sum you can have from either of those sections. Remember though, the maximum is just that, it is the maximum. So you can choose to do anything up to the maximum amount for tax-free purposes, okay? Wonderful, right. I am going to stop the recording, but I'm not going anywhere just yet. So thank you, everyone.